We're about to jump into this incredible story from early Christian tradition. It's a real showdown, a conflict between, get this, the world's greatest empire and this one man they just could not break. Let's dive in. Okay, so picture this. It's late in the first century. You've got the Roman Empire, right? I mean, this is the superpower. They could crush armies, topple entire kingdoms. Basically, they can enforce their will anywhere. But then they hit a wall. They came up against a problem they couldn't intimidate, they couldn't imprison, and they couldn't even kill. What do you even do with that?
And I mean, look at this mismatch. It's almost comical. On one side, you have the entire might of the Roman Empire. We're talking legions, governors, Caesar himself, the whole shebang. And on the other side, it's not some rival king or a rebel general. No, it's just one guy, an elderly preacher named John. He's got no army, no political clout, nothing but his words.
So that brings us to our first part here, Rome's unsolvable problem, the emperor versus the apostle. The whole thing really kicks off under Emperor Domitian. Now, you gotta understand, Domitian wasn't just any ruler. He was one of the first emperors to really push this idea of being worshipped as a living god. He wanted the title Lord and God. And for him, this wasn't just an ego trip. It was a political strategy to hold his massive empire together. So if you refused, well, that wasn't just a religious disagreement. That was treason. And for a guy like John, there was only one Lord, and believe me, it was not Caesar. So what does a superpower do when someone defies them? Exactly what you'd expect. They use the only tool they really trust, force. Rome's response was so predictable. No discussion, no debate, they just sent soldiers. The orders are probably simple, right? Go to Ephesus, find this preacher, shut him down, end of story. Okay, moving on, because this is where the whole story just completely flips on its head. This was supposed to be a simple arrest. Steal meets conviction. But, spoiler alert, it did not go the way Rome planned. Not even close. Seriously, just try to imagine this scene. You've got these hardened Roman soldiers. They're on a mission. They show up to arrest this guy, probably expecting a struggle or at least some fear. But they get something totally different. John doesn't fight, he doesn't run, he just starts talking. And the soldiers, they just stop and they listen. So what on earth could one old man say to make a unit of Roman soldiers just freeze in their tracks? Well, he started talking about a different kind of kingdom, one that wasn't built on fear and power like theirs was. He talked about a lord who was way, way bigger than Caesar, and he told them about a life that was actually stronger than death itself. For these men, whose whole world was built on strength and mortality, this was mind-blowing. It was totally alien, but somehow incredibly compelling. And the result of all this? You're not going to believe it. The soldiers, the ones sent to arrest him, were so captivated by what he said, they just turned around and left. They went back to their commander completely empty-handed. The mission was a total, absolute failure. And get this wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't a fluke. It started happening over and over again. Rome gets frustrated, sends more soldiers. And what happens? They go, they listen, and they come back. Changed. Every single time they tried to fix this John problem, they just made it worse. It's like they weren't just failing to arrest him anymore, they were actively losing their own guys to his message. So finally, according to Christian tradition, the local Roman officials just threw their hands in the air. They were done. And there's this quote that just perfectly captures their total frustration. Stop sending men to arrest him. He only makes them Christians. Can you imagine? Their best tool, their military, had become the biggest liability. Sending soldiers to John was literally like pouring gasoline on a fire. So if sending soldiers just made things worse, Rome had to up the ante, right? This brings us to their next, more desperate phase, taking the problem all the way to the top. And you can see how things escalated on this timeline. First, the local arrests fail spectacularly. So they escalate to a public execution. That's supposed to be the final answer. And when that doesn't work, well, there's only one card left to play: exile. And that execution attempt, wow. According to the historian Tertullian, they actually dragged John all the way to Rome for a big public spectacle. Their plan was horrific. Plunge him into a cauldron of boiling oil. This was meant to be a terrifying warning to everyone. But the story goes he survived, completely unharmed. Just think about how embarrassing that was for the empire. Another huge public failure. Okay, so they can't convert him and they can't kill him. Rome falls back on its last resort, isolation. The thinking was if we can just cut him off from everyone,
His influence has to die out. And this leads to the most ironic twist in the entire story. So when you look back at everything they tried, you have to ask yourself, what was Rome's single biggest mistake? Well, they thought that isolation was the answer. They shipped him off to Patmos, a barren, rocky prison island. This was where you sent political troublemakers to be forgotten. No crowds, no followers, no way for his message to get out. Rome finally thought, okay, we've built a prison that can hold this man and his ideas. But here's the ultimate backfire. The total silence and isolation of Patmos, it didn't shut him down. It was there, in exile, that he had the visions that would become the Book of Revelation. The very thing Rome did to erase his voice from history is the exact reason his most famous work even exists. They didn't just fail to silence him. They accidentally gave him a megaphone to speak across centuries. So, after all that, what do we take away from this? What's the real lesson from this incredible showdown between an empire and an apostle? And real quick, before we get to the final takeaway, it's worth noting where this story comes from. This isn't some modern fan fiction. It's rooted deep in the memory of the early church, passed down right where John lived and worked, and it's recorded by early historians like Eusebius and Tertullian. And I think the key to the whole thing is this. John never fought Rome in the way they understood fighting. He didn't lead a rebellion, he didn't use force. His whole strategy was different. He just loved the very men Rome sent to stop him. He met their power not with defiance, but with a truth they couldn't ignore. It really boils down to this simple, powerful idea. You just cannot defeat a message that's carried with love. Rome's weapons were fear and steel. John's only weapon was his message, and he delivered it with genuine care, even for his would-be captors. And in that matchup, love was just stronger. So let's end with this thought. Rome had a simple goal: make one old man stop talking. But every single time they tried, the exact opposite happened. The story of John is this incredible testament from history that sometimes the most powerful way to deal with opposition isn't to crush it, but to change it from the inside out.